speak a little bit about the interpretation of Islamic law as it pertains to the arts? Because certainly, like with the medical field, that has become a source of controversy within the Islamic world on how the approach of westernized culture and arts has come in via the media, etc.
Do you mean specifically the argument over representing the human form?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Islam obviously, like every religious tradition, has generated great arts of its own according to its own aesthetic. And the fact that Muslims generally have not favoured representing the human form is not just due to a kind of Mosaic prohibition on images, but also because the metabolism of the religion doesn't actually need that. God himself is not represented in human form. God is manifested in a script, and so Islamic calligraphy is the most interesting visual representation of the sacred for Muslims. But there are a number of hadiths that do prohibit the creation of images, graven images, and a mosque, like a traditional synagogue, will not contain images. And traditional Islamic art, like traditional Jewish art, doesn't represent human figures, let alone prophets or angels or the divine. The main controversy now is whether photography actually constitutes making an image or not. And for a long time, it was assumed that it did. Nowadays, the majority fatwa is overwhelmingly that actually a photographer is not rivaling God's creative act, which is the argument against making an image, but is in fact capturing what they call habs al-zil, or capturing a shadow. So you're merely presenting God's creation or perpetuating an image of it, rather than creating an image and attempting to create a person or an expression yourself. So overwhelmingly, photography is now allowed, although there are conservative circles that don't allow it. And that's the basis of the prohibition on television amongst some very conservative circles. The traditional prohibition on pictorial art and on sculpture, however, does still hold. Although that's less important than it might have been 100 years ago, in that the West's arts, which are impinging on the Muslim world, have now generally moved beyond expressionism and pictorial images, and it's all, well, whatever it is, Tracy Amin and the walls of the Tate Gallery. But yeah, the traditional prohibition is still formally in place.